Hi there, Tape Reader Joe here again. I'm just going to do a quick review of NQ morning session from today, June the 24th. So I started to look at the market this morning about just after 9:30, and I'm looking for higher prices. And what I was doing, I was waiting for the drop to my point of interest. I didn't think I saw it here at 9:30. I can see a small kind of volume imbalance that could potentially be a buy. That's the IFED, Institutional Order Flow Entry Drill. I'm seeing that there's SMT getting invalidated on the move up, but I was really looking for some more liquidity to be taken on the downside before moving on up. Here, looking at the 5-second chart, just looking to see what's kind of really going on in the detail. We had a retrace, we took a high and retraced lower and then continued up, kept moving up higher. But as I say to you, I was waiting, that was at the 9:45 macro, at the beginning of it. But yeah, I wasn't really satisfied with that. I was thinking, as I say to you, I was really looking for some kind of liquidity stream. If you see that at 9:30, we didn't see that drop down before the previous cycle's low, so I was just, holding on. As you can see, I wanted to trade, but it seems like price was in no man's land. There was my point of interest. I had two of them marked. That's what I was looking for before, where I was looking to see a reversal, but price didn't go down there. There's a few, you can see that there's an imbalance. We went through it. It be that fair value gap, I should say, marked by those two black lines, and price returns through it, and it becomes an inverted fair value gap eventually. You can see we've got the SMT at the bottom again. If you're depending on your model, you could have taken some of these trades, but they weren't really in my model. So I said I'm not going to trade just yet, because that's historically what I've always done. I've kind of jumped in, even though it wasn't in my model, and then I've kind of lost. So I said, no, let me wait. And just full disclaimer, I didn't do any trade in the end today, but I just read the tape. As you can see, that volume imbalance that I marked up there, you can notice how prices using that, it's supporting against it after 10 o'clock, and it feels like there's just time distortion and consolidation and not a lot happening. We see this massive drop down, just remove some liquidity. It doesn't go below that wick from 9:33 as such, but we do quickly move back up high, and you can see the SMT on the 90-minute and the 30-minute. I actually think maybe the SMT on 90 and 30-minute, I've noticed this a few times in back testing, that's a really strong confirmation. If you get 30-minute and 90-minute SMT, that seems to be a very strong signal that price is going to move upwards. So as we approach the 10:15, so that's the 9:45 to 10:15 macro, as you say, it was kind of side movement, and now price starts to move after 10:15. That looks like it might be a rejection. So again, I didn't want to jump in at all here, because the price was, again, as far as I was concerned, moving sideways. It's just reached that fair value gap. So could that be a sell at that point? Quite possibly. But as I say to you, I didn't do anything because, as I say, I was waiting for price to return to my point of interest. And so, you know, I figured it's going to be some level of distortion all the way to the next macro, 1045. And as you can see, price hung around in this fair value gap imbalance that was marked, and we get another drop at 1030. But you notice how price is kind of contained within the margins of that previous cycle, AM1 cycle. And that's why, to me, this was just like all sideways movement. So I was like, no, I don't really want to get involved. Just going kind of back and forth. One step up, two steps backwards, so to speak. So this is the thing, you know. I guess this is what you've got to kind of try and learn as you're learning to read the tape, the signs. You know, in hindsight, it's very clear where the entries could have been or should have been. But in the moment, as I say, I was trying to stay true to my model. And this price movement that was happening this morning on NQ wasn't really fitting with the model that I am looking to trade, or that I have the most kind of confidence with. And as I say to you, I wasn't confident. As much as I was looking for higher prices, I didn't think we had a strong enough pullback to a point of interest for price to move forward. That wasn't what I was looking for. As you can see, we now take the previous cycle's high. There is still SMT 90 minute at the top. So again, for me, that wasn't enough. That was enough reason for me not to get in, because you should be cautious if you're seeing SMT at the top and at the bottom. It just signals range bound. But as you can see, we kind of keep moving forward slowly in a channel. We retest the low of that previous cycle high, as I noticed there, and as you know, I extend some of these lines that I had, and I noticed the reactions to them. So I mean, if you were, as I note there, a scalper, you could have quite, you know, easily, I say easily, scalped in between all of these imbalances that we've seen between the 9:33 to 10:45, and utilize them in order to get your wins as such. You may have recalled from my previous video, I was saying that, you know, I noticed that from 9:30 to 11 is a good range where you find that there's often a high at 11 o'clock, and that's where we're kind of approaching. Yeah, the range isn't as big as, you know, some of the other days that we saw this week, for example, yesterday, but there was still, you know, an element of a range. I think you've moved from 22,050 all the way up to 22,125. So that's not a bad level, and we were just approaching 11 o'clock. You know, that's almost 75, almost approaching 100 points. So that could be something in there if you're looking at, you know, just having a point target as opposed to a liquidity target. If your target is 100 points a day, then that could have been it, so to speak. But yeah, price is just slowly creeping up forward, back and forth, but it is respecting each of the swing highs. You break it, you might sweep a little bit of liquidity, and then you continue going forward. And this is kind of really what happened all throughout the entire morning up until well, throughout the entire day, to be honest, because I saw that we ended up reaching all-time highs again, which ultimately was the goal. But I didn't think we were gonna, or not that I didn't think we were gonna get there today. What I wanted was to get the retracement to a more significant point of interest first, and that didn't quite happen. But this has been a really good tape reading for me today to really see how price has moved. And price has moved from one range to another, because it was a big range in the end. If you look at the hourly candles, it was all green candles all the way up to the top. And it didn't look like that at the time, because it was, I guess, a high resistance liquidity run. Back and forth, break a high, go back down, take some liquidity, move back higher. So here you would have got your 100 points, and that would have been, good enough for me for the day, to be quite honest with you. But I didn't get in. So as approaching the 11:30 time, you can see that price is continuing up higher, and this is essentially what happened throughout the entire day. And it only comes from the back testing and familiarizing yourself with, with the way in which price moves, that you would have felt confident in taking a trade this morning. As I say, it wasn't in my model, the framework wasn't in my model, so I didn't do it, and I'm pleased with myself for not just trading for the sake of trading, and I'm confident that there'll be more setups again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that, and that's when I will look to focus on just that one thing, because as I realise that this is like baking a cake, and you've got to stick to the same ingredients, and there's only one type of cake I'm making at the moment, and so that is, and until I perfect that cake, I'm going to keep using the same ingredients every single day. And maybe once I've perfected that cake, I can move on to the next flavour, and start doing more. But each time you chop and change, you just get all sorts of things out on the other side. But as you can see, we're now approaching the 11:45 macro, and you can see the range that has already been established thus far. As I say, this has really been a nice price run from 9:30, but as I say, it was not my model, and so I didn't trade it at all. And that's where I kind of just decided, obviously had other things to do today, and when I actually look back at what happened, back into the hour, I can see, that should have been my point of interest. I didn't see it this morning, and if I had seen that, that was where my entry should have been. As you saw, there were 2 points to enter, and there would have been the take profit. But alas, today it wasn't for me, but there's always tomorrow.